we were kind of, like first time we've done the podcast together for a couple of weeks, even though, I mean, we do other podcasts, but normally there's like a third person.
Yep.
We invite a third.
Yeah.
There's someone else there.
Keep it fresh.
To make sure.
Hey, me and my podcast partner saw you across the bar.
Well, in the same way as even when you might have someone over, like you're on a bit more of your behavior, like you're checking everything's right. Do they need another drink? Are they sitting comfortably? Would they like to listen to something else? Watch, you're attendant to their needs. You're on a bit more of your best behavior in front of other people, where we are a couple who have, been together a long time. Sometimes there's an element of, just a tap on the shoulder in the middle of the night about the whole thing. You don't have to go to dinner. We don't have time for that. So you asked me if I was doing a backup. And I'd forgotten that I was going to do a backup. And for people listening at home, that means Charlie and I record this on a program, a
virtual studio
called Riverside. And so it takes both ends, and then, it all gets combined together as if we're, in the same place. But we record a separate feed just at our own ends in case something goes wrong. And so it very much is just the backup. If Riverside doesn't upload, or if, it cuts out or something, you've just got a backup. But it's only of the individual audio. So when I'm recording at my end, it is just me. And what I realized is that once that backup isn't needed, once the podcast is up and about, technically, like a more thorough person, they would go through the backups and then they would erase all the backup files so that, there's more room on your computer, or just out of it. Well, I don't need that anymore. The very reason that it existed, there's no longer a reason for that. But as I went to do my little backup, had a look at how many other backed up episodes I have that I haven't erased. And if I died and someone found my computer and didn't know that I did a podcast, that would be a very weird file of hundreds of hours of me seemingly having a conversation with no one. In fact, we could put it out as a template where you can make your own episode of TOEFL, right? We each could put out we do the one that's the two of us together. Then each week we release our own ends of it, and people could have their own, they could fill in their own conversations with us.
It's like the way breakfast morning shows will put up an interview to make a politician sound like they're giving dirty answers to a question or something like that. You could easily do that with us. I don't know. You just got me thinking about the way this show backs up. I'm not saying that TOEFL needs to be preserved for eternity, but is there infinite storage space in the cloud? We're just assuming all these episodes that we've recorded that have all been uploaded somewhere. I know we had a hard drive going at one point back three mics ago. We had a hard drive where we were logging raw data and finished episodes. I don't know what's going on with the archive system. I'm assuming since we've gone to Riverside, everything, Two Guys, One Cup, this, Philosophy, is all getting logged into the Riverside cloud. But are there limits to that? What do they do? Do they hold on to that as long as we subscribe?
I don't know how any of it works. Can we run out of cloud?
I honestly don't know.
And if the cloud goes down, because there's always stories about the ABC. So ABC archives used to be, a version of the internet before there was the internet. They would keep all the things that had been on ABC TV because storage space and the technology back then, that was extremely costly. There's those nightmare stories about the fact that, there's episodes of Doctor Who that don't exist because the BBC needed the tape space and they taped over them,
with an episode countdown or something.
Right? And so is there a point where, because everything is content now, right? It's 24/7 content. Is there a limit for our, there's a limit for our capacity to consume content, but is there a limit for our capacity to store content? And if everything is content and you're storing everything, what's the point of storing anything?
Yeah, I think yes is the answer. There is a limit to storage space in current computing terms, which is why there's such a push towards quantum computing, because then it becomes I think either infinite or exponentially so great that storage no longer becomes an issue, because at the moment we're limited by the physical size of transistors. I'm reading a book by a theoretical physicist at the moment that I'm not understanding, which is all about quantum computing. But this is like the dumbest. Take the layman's terms and then dumb it down about 7 layers, and you get to what my understanding of it is. But that is what we're trying to get to, is like just exponentially powerful computers, and that would then result in sort of infinite storage. So I mean, you could even, theoretically, you could even reconstruct, like if AI gets to the point where where it understands everything so well that there may be lost episodes of Doctor Who or even TOEFOP, but you could say to the AI, hey, we know that they talked about this. Could you, do your like 90% accuracy, reconstruct this missing episode of TOEFOP? It's about Superman and his enormous dick or something like that.
But because like we couldn't, because we're different people, right? And this would be the interesting thing about that thought experiment. So say, for example, it was an early episode of TOEFOP, right?
Mm-hmm. And I believe there is a missing episode of TOEFOP. I think there is in the TOEFOP lore, it's like episode 37 or something, or there's an episode that no one can find that doesn't
Is that
exist.
right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, like TOEFOPologists out there will know better than me.
Let us know. I would like to know about that. I wasn't aware that was the case. There's also, just on this, I'll put it like maybe I'll put a pin in this and come back to it, but remind me to talk to you about the missing episode of FOFOP. Because I just want to follow through this idea of, because I've been talking about for years this idea that podcasts would be perhaps something that would be easy to replicate because you've got so much available information. And again, dumb it down 7 times past the layman's version, right? But my layman's understanding is the more information the AI has to work with, the more accurate the thing that they can produce at the other end. That seems to be right? Like, right. But the majority of the TOEFOP, so if you were programming that AI to replicate episode 37, are you only feeding in the first 36 episodes of TOEFOP? Because that's all the information, because that's a limited data set, 37 episodes of TOEFOP. That's not a full picture of you and I. Or would it be more or less accurate if they then put in all the rest of TOEFOP? Because that's us growing up and changing as people. So would that skew the data, or would that give the AI more information and it could extrapolate better? Like, even because it would still know more about us, it could make an extrapolation of what our opinions on those things would be at that time.
It's interesting conundrum, because we often repeat ourselves.
Right.
We've talked about this before. There are definitely kind of themes, but in terms like of the broad sense, like we have moved through our kind of like, there was the Adam Sandler phase, and then there was like the rock phase, and, I became a father, like all these kind of things. We moved to the Northern Rivers. Like there's been all these different eras. So that none of that would be relevant. But
also, all right, here's the thing then. So say it was episode 1 to 36 they put in, right? Yeah. We're trying to replicate 37 the best we can. We believe that we've got to get rid of any
references past 2011.
Yeah,
or whatever
but also most of the things that we talked about, or the jokes in the way that we made them, over the next, hundreds of episodes, we've talked about how our positions on those things might have changed or developed. And so the audience who listens now has an understanding of what that journey has been, right? So, but if we use the AI just 1 to 36 to AI episode 37, and it came up with, based on the conversations we've had then, something that was non-PC by today's standards, would we get cancelled? Would we get cancelled because the AI came up with a joke based on us back then, and put it in this AI episode? Like, would we be able to defend ourselves?
Well, people get cancelled for tweets from 10 years ago. Yeah. So I think yes. I mean, even though it's not us actually saying it, it's not a direct quote, it's been mined from our content. And if people
you know what I think is a problem with progress, honestly, not with progress itself, but something that holds us back from progressing.
Is this your pivot towards conservatism?
No, it's the opposite, I reckon. Oh, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I'll say it and then you can decide what it is. No, I think that sort of stuff holds us back, right? This idea that because then people are afraid to change quickly because they think that they're going to be, busted for having an outdated opinion. I think it's great sometimes when you go, hey, 10 years ago you thought this, and that's really outdated then. That, to me, that's a sign that things have progressed, that things have changed, and they've done it in a quick fashion. Like, that's actually a good thing. And so what if, because we're coming up with new ways to like understand how we use the internet. What if we just brought in some fresh start legislation? Like we just agree on a number, whatever it is, 7 years or something. Like there should be some sort of like, but just every 7 years on social media, and even with podcasts, maybe everything's erased.
Yep.
So if you want, you've got
opinion amnesty.
Yeah. But just you get a fresh start every 7 years. Like, they say there's that kind of thing, again, dumbing it completely down, but like that our skin essentially regenerates, every 7 years in cells or whatever. It's like, give us that for the internet.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't be accountable, but it gives you the opportunity to, like, every 7 years, have a look at some of it, what your opinions were and everything, and you can do a little update.
War side of it.
Yeah.
That is the argument, especially around like comedy. Is like, you've got certain comedians who are coming out and saying, oh, you know what? Like when I did those jokes, it was a different world. And, I certainly wouldn't do those jokes now, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got other comedians who are like, cancel this, that's the name of their new special, or censored, or, like triggered, or whatever the fuck it is. So I would be interested to know if it remains relatively 50-50, or if you've got more people willing to move on. Like if you looked at another artist,
yeah.
if you looked at another
I would say,
like,
okay. So just two things on that comedy one, because you're absolutely right. And I think there's two thoughts on that, which is, the first one is that there are some people I definitely think would be more open to, like, smart people who I think that a lot of the reason they don't want things to change is because they made something that was great at the time, and now it's being viewed through modern eyes and judged, and people don't think it is like, and so you have to, like, change is bad for you. I think if we had more forgiveness of, no, that was of its time and it's a good thing. Like, look at the progress we've made, but it doesn't mean that was bad then. I think people would be more open to it. But there's also money in it, right?
Yeah.
Some people have monetized it. Like you said, that's why the tours are called You Can't Say This. Like, like I've been triggered, or like, people, I've been censored, you can't say anything to what happened to the larrikin.
Yeah, where you can't do a 1 hour special on a streaming service anymore, and my 1 hour special.
Yeah, my 1 hour special on Netflix called You Can't Say This. Things I can't say anymore.
It's funny. I was talking to someone a couple of days ago about this very thing. Like there was that sort of, I feel like we've gone past that phase of, I know occasionally people still keep receipts and dig up old tweets and stuff, but there was a period of time where it was like Molly Ringwald wrote that opinion piece saying, oh, the Breakfast Club is problematic. And someone found like a John Wayne interview from Playboy from 1965. And it's like, oh, wow, he was really racist. And I sort of feel like that moment has passed where we're trying to go back and, like look at history through a modern lens. I
feel like it's like, I mean, we're never going to get progress if we revisit the past through a modern lens. Like that doesn't help anybody to go back. Like, of course things were different. They used to burn witches in the town square, right? Like,
that's problematic, Will. I don't know. I take a firm stand on burning people at the stake for witchcraft. I don't know about you, but I feel like maybe that's problematic.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, progress is a good thing. And I think sometimes the thing that holds progress back is people. I agree that if, say, for example, some like director might be making a living out of, I invented feminism, and they go back and find out that actually they did some really problematic things when it came to women. That's someone being a hypocrite.
Talking about Joss Whedon?
Well, the more I said that sentence, the more it sounded like Joss Whedon. I didn't start with the intention to talk about Joss Whedon, but by the end of the sentence, I was like, this sounds a lot like Joss Whedon.
It was just this phrase, I invented feminism.
But like that's someone saying this person's being disingenuous, they're being a hypocrite. But if it's more like somebody going, I used to believe this and I now have learned that this, that's good. That's progress. That's actually what we're looking for. So like, I think that should be encouraged and celebrated.
Well, there's a lot of talk about Eddie Murphy. I don't know if it's still happening, but he was going to get back on the stand-up circuit, or he's going to at least do a special or something like that. But then I'd read a couple of interviews where he was like, I'm embarrassed of a lot of that stuff from Delirious and Raw. Like, that was a 21-year-old me saying those jokes. And part of his kind of apprehension was like, if I was to do it again, if people are coming to see that Eddie Murphy, like doesn't exist anymore. Like, his Disney man, Eddie Murphy these days.
Yeah, he's not doing the "you can't say this anymore" tour, and but that's why I'd love to see. I actually think I've talked about this before, but like Eddie Murphy, like some of those jokes on those specials are crook by even the standards of the day. Some would argue, like not even just historically, but certainly if they were appropriate by the standards of the day. Even most people moved on from those. It was so they became out of date very quickly. But they were the two biggest. Like he was the biggest comedy star in the world. They were the two biggest specials in the world, and then he stopped. He stopped doing it. Now, any other comedian like that who'd started like that, if he kept doing it, you would have seen what the journey became. He might have been someone who leaned into that more, and that became all his shtick, or he might have been someone like the early Tofop episodes. Yes, I am. Yes, I am comparing the early Tofop episodes to Raw and Delirious. Because Charlie and I used to wear red leather suits when we recorded Tofop. But you would have heard him talk about that, right? You would have heard him talk about his developing thoughts around those things, and he would have done new stand-up, and you would have got a broader picture. But because he's always been that 18, 20-year-old like Eddie Murphy, with those like dumb young people opinions, they're trapped there for they're immortalized.
Yeah.
Of course he doesn't think those same things. Of course he wouldn't want to be doing that sort of comedy. Like he'd be a monster if he did.
To see the full video, join our Patreon.
Patreon.com/Tofop.